Mercedes just broke Formula 1, and nobody can explain how. A 1-2 finish in China. Total domination. Not a single weakness. But here's the part that has the entire paddock worried. Their car doesn't run out of energy. Not at the end of the straight. Not after multiple laps. Not even under pressure. And that should be impossible. Because every team on the grid is limited. Everyone has to manage energy. Everyone hits the same ceiling. Except Mercedes. And now the FIA is looking at data that doesn't make sense. Engineers are confused. Rival teams are already asking questions. Because if this is an energy trick, this isn't just smart engineering. This is a loophole that could decide the entire season. Stay here, because the detail that exposes this changes everything. And once you hear it, you'll understand why the FIA might be forced to step in. Subscribe now. Right after the Chinese Grand Prix, the reaction inside Formula 1 was not what you would expect. It wasn't just excitement. It wasn't just headlines about a dominant win. It was confusion. Because what Mercedes showed on track didn't just look fast. It looked controlled in a way that made engineers uncomfortable. From the very first session in Shanghai, the pattern was already clear. Russell at the top. Antonelli right there. Every session. Every condition. No fluctuation. No drop. Just consistent pace that never seemed to fade. And that's unusual. Even the best cars on the grid show variation. Tires degrade. Balance shifts. Energy systems hit their limits. Something always interrupts perfection. But Mercedes never lost it. The W17 looked stable everywhere. High-speed corners. Low-speed traction. Clean exits. No instability. But the real difference appeared after the corners. The straights. Because this is where every team reveals its limitation. Halfway down the straight, you feel it. The energy starts to drop. Deployment fades. The car stops gaining speed. That's normal. That's the rule. Mercedes didn't follow that pattern. They just kept accelerating. Smooth. Continuous. Like the system never reached its limit. And that's where the first real questions began. Because energy deployment in Formula 1 is not flexible. It's restricted. Carefully regulated. You cannot extend it endlessly. You have to choose where to use it. Where to save it. Where to sacrifice. But Mercedes didn't look like they were sacrificing anything. And that's what made this different. Now go back to the race start. Hamilton gets ahead. Ferrari finally leads. For a moment, it feels real. Like the fight is there. And then the straight arrives. Antonelli gets the slipstream. Deploys. And passes him before the braking zone, like it was inevitable. That moment wasn't just about speed. It was about something deeper. Control over energy. Control over how long that energy lasts. And it kept happening. Lap after lap. Every straight. Same result. Now here's where things become impossible to ignore. Ferrari wasn't slow. They were strong in corners. Better traction. Competitive pace. But they couldn't defend. They couldn't attack. Because every time the straight came, Mercedes had something extra. Not a sudden boost. Not a risky move. A consistent advantage. And consistency in Formula 1 always leads to questions. Because a one-time gain can be luck. But a repeatable advantage, that's design. That's intention. And that's exactly what pushed engineers to look deeper. Not at how fast Mercedes is, but at how that speed is being sustained. Because if that answer doesn't fit within the expected limits, then this isn't just dominance anymore. This is something much bigger. And much harder to ignore. And this is where everything starts to get uncomfortable. Because once teams stopped watching the race and started studying the data, the story changed completely. After China, engineers didn't look at highlights. They went straight into telemetry. Speed traces. Energy deployment curves. Sector-by-sector analysis. Not to accuse. Just to understand. And very quickly, something didn't add up. Because every team on the grid knows exactly how their car behaves. They know where energy peaks. They know where it drops. They know the exact moment the system reaches its limit. It's predictable. It's controlled. It's restricted. But when they looked at Mercedes, that limit wasn't there. The data didn't show the usual pattern. No spike. No drop. Just a flat, consistent deployment from the exit of the corner, all the way to the end of the straight. And that's not normal. Because in Formula 1, energy doesn't work like that. You either deploy early and lose later. Or save early and gain at the end. There is always a trade-off. Always a compromise. But Mercedes didn't seem to have one. And that's where the concern begins. Because that kind of behavior suggests something very specific. Not more power. Better control of power. Better recovery. Better timing. A system that wastes nothing and delivers everything. Now here's where it becomes even more interesting. Because this isn't just about the engine. This is about integration. The engine, the battery, the recovery system, the software controlling it all, working together perfectly. And when everything is synchronized like that, you don't just gain performance. You remove weaknesses. That's exactly what Mercedes looked like in China. No weak phase. No vulnerable moment. Just constant performance. Now imagine being another team. You know your limits. You fight them every lap. You manage energy. You compromise performance. And then you see a car that doesn't seem to compromise at all. That's when questions become unavoidable. And those questions reach the FIA. Not as accusations, but as pressure. Requests for clarification. Requests to understand if this behavior is even within the intended limits. Because if it is, everyone needs to copy it. But if it isn't, it needs to be controlled. And that's the exact situation right now. Because the FIA isn't looking for something illegal. They're looking at something more dangerous. A gray area. A space where the rules don't clearly define the limit. And Mercedes might be operating exactly there. Right on the edge. Maximizing everything, without technically breaking anything. And if that's true, then the solution is simple. Not a penalty. A clarification. A technical directive. A small change in how the rules are interpreted. And suddenly, what Mercedes is doing today might not be allowed tomorrow. And that's the real threat. Because this isn't a small advantage. This is the foundation of their dominance. Take it away, and everything changes. Top speed drops. Overtaking becomes harder. Defending becomes weaker. And the control we saw in China starts to disappear. Now think about Ferrari. They're already close. Closer than the results suggest. Strong in corners. Competitive in race pace. Just missing that final piece. And if Mercedes loses that piece, even slightly, the fight is on. But there's another layer. One that makes this even more unstable. Because inside Mercedes, there is already tension building. Antonelli just won. Russell has already proven he can win. 2 drivers. 1 car. And now, uncertainty. Because if performance changes, even a little, that internal balance breaks. And when that happens, mistakes follow. Pressure increases. Decisions become harder. So now everything is connected. The dominance in China. The strange behavior in the data. The questions from rival teams. The growing attention from the FIA. And the internal pressure inside Mercedes. All building toward one moment. One decision. One clarification that could redefine the entire season. And the most important detail? The exact mechanism behind this energy consistency is still hidden. But once it becomes clear, it won't just explain their advantage. It will explain why the entire grid is starting to get nervous. And now, we reach the point where this stops being just a theory. Because the FIA is no longer just observing. They're trying to define something that doesn't behave like anything else on the grid. After China, the focus shifted from performance to behavior over time. Not one lap. Not one straight. An entire race distance. Because that's where every system eventually shows its weakness. Energy fades. Temperatures rise. Efficiency drops. Something always gives. But Mercedes didn't show any of that. Lap after lap, the same output. The same acceleration. The same stability in energy deployment. No visible degradation. And that's the detail that changes everything. Because now the FIA is asking a much more specific question. Not how much energy Mercedes is using, but how they're able to sustain it. And that leads directly to the most sensitive part of the system. Energy recovery. Because everything starts there. If you recover more energy than others, you can deploy more. If you recover it more efficiently, you can sustain it longer. And if you control that cycle perfectly, you eliminate the natural drop that every other team experiences. Now imagine a system that is doing exactly that. Recovering energy under braking with almost no loss. Storing it without overheating. Deploying it in a perfectly controlled curve. And repeating that process every single lap. That's not just performance. That's precision. At a level that forces the FIA to step in and understand it. Because the regulations don't just limit output. They define behavior. What a system should look like when it reaches its limits. And Mercedes doesn't look like it's reaching those limits at all. And that creates a problem. Because if one team can operate without visible constraints, then the competitive balance is already broken. And Formula One reacts to that. Not always with penalties, but with adjustments, clarifications, new interpretations of existing rules. And that's exactly what could happen next. A technical directive. A subtle change in how energy deployment must behave. Not how much, but how. Forcing systems to show a natural drop. Forcing teams back into the same performance window. And if that happens, Mercedes loses its biggest strength instantly. Now think about the consequences. A car that looked untouchable in China suddenly becomes beatable. A system that felt perfect suddenly has limits. And the advantage that defined the weekend disappears, not gradually, immediately. And that's when everything changes. Because Ferrari is already there. Close enough. Strong enough. Just waiting for that one weakness. And if Mercedes loses even a fraction of this energy advantage, that weakness appears. But here's the part that makes this even more intense. Mercedes knows this. They understand exactly where their advantage comes from. They know how close they are to the edge. So now they face a critical moment. Do they defend their system? Or prepare for the possibility that it gets taken away? Because if the FIA acts, there is no transition period. No slow adjustment. It's immediate. And that's when the entire structure of the team is tested. Because inside Mercedes, there is already pressure. Antonelli just proved he can win. Russell is not backing down. 2 drivers. 1 car. And now, uncertainty. And when uncertainty enters a dominant team, control starts to slip. Decisions become harder. Risks become bigger. Mistakes become more likely. So now everything is aligned for a turning point. The dominance in China. The strange behavior in the data. The growing pressure from rival teams. The attention from the FIA. And the internal tension inside Mercedes. All building toward one moment. One decision. One clarification that could redefine the entire season. And the final piece? The exact mechanism that allows Mercedes to sustain that energy without visible loss is still hidden. But once it's fully understood, it won't just explain their advantage. It will explain why the FIA might have no choice but to change everything.